The oil lamp's flame cast dancing shadows across the treaty papers spread before Elder Rowan, each document a death sentence dressed in formal language. Serafina stood at the edge of her grandfather's study, her fingers gripping the doorframe as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. "Read it again," she whispered, though she'd memorized every damning word the first time. Rowan's weathered hands trembled as he lifted the parchment bearing the royal seal of Nighthaven Kingdom. His voice cracked on the opening line. "By decree of His Majesty, Cale Thornridge, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, the Embervale Pack is hereby found in violation of the Treaty of Silverpine, having failed to provide tribute for 3 consecutive harvest seasons." "We had nothing to give," Sarah interrupted, her voice sharp with desperate anger. "The blight took our crops. The fever took half our hunters. What were we supposed to offer? Our bones? The law doesn't care about our suffering, child." Rowan set the paper down, and Sarah saw tears tracking through the deep lines of his face. "The penalty is dissolution. By the next full moon, Embervale ceases to exist. Our lands will be forfeit. Our people will be scattered to other packs as refugees, if they're accepted at all. More likely they'll be... Don't." Sarah crossed the small room in 3 strides, kneeling beside her grandfather's chair. Through the thin walls of their modest pack house, she could hear the sounds of Ashwood Village settling into an uneasy night. 43 souls, all that remained of a pack that had once numbered in the hundreds. 43 people who depended on the Ashmore bloodline for protection, for leadership, for hope. There has to be another way. There was. Rowan's gaze drifted to the second document, this one edged in black. Sarah had refused to touch it. Lord Corvus Ashford made that perfectly clear when he delivered the king's judgment. Sarah's stomach churned at the memory of the royal emissary's visit 3 days ago. Lord Corvus had arrived with an escort of 20 armored soldiers, his smile cold as winter stone as he'd outlined their options with practiced cruelty. "The Alpha King is a reasonable man," Corvus had said, his pale eyes traveling over Sarah in a way that made her skin crawl. "He understands that Embervale's diminished circumstances were not entirely within your control. He's prepared to offer a pardon, complete forgiveness of all debts, and a guarantee of Embervale's continued sovereignty." "In exchange for what?" Rowan had asked, though Sarah had already known. She'd felt the weight of Corvus's stare, had seen the calculation in his expression. "The Ashmore bloodline carries old magic," Corvus had replied. "Serafina is 19, unmated, and by all accounts quite intact. His Majesty requires a bride. If she agrees to wed him before the next full moon, your pack will be spared." The memory of her grandfather's anguished expression still haunted Sarah. The way his face had crumpled, the way he'd looked at her with such devastating sorrow and said, "Absolutely not. We'll find another way." But there was no other way. They'd spent 3 days searching desperately for alternatives, and every path led to the same conclusion. Embervale was dying, and Sarah was their only hope. "Grandfather." She took his gnarled hands in hers. "Tell me about him. The truth, not the stories." Rowan was silent for a long moment, his eyes distant. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Cale Thornridge took the Obsidian Throne 15 years ago when he was barely 20. His father had been a tyrant, cruel and mad with power. Cale killed him in single combat during the Blood Moon ceremony, in front of every pack in the Northern Territories." Sarah's breath caught. Patricide was the gravest taboo among their kind. "He's ruled with absolute authority ever since," Rowan continued. "They call him the Winter King because his heart is said to be as cold as frost. They say he's never shown mercy to anyone who defies him. They say..." He broke off, shaking his head. "They say a lot of things, child. Some of them are probably even true." Has he killed innocents? Sarah asked directly. I don't know. Rowan's honesty was somehow worse than a lie. I know he's ruthless. I know his enemies disappear. I know no one dares challenge his rule, because the last 3 alphas who tried ended up with their heads mounted on the gates of Crimson Citadel. Sarah stood, moving to the window. Outside, she could see Lyric in the village square, her 17-year-old sister laughing with a group of children. Lyric still had hope. Lyric still believed their grandfather would fix everything, the way he always had. The courier leaves at dawn, Sarah said quietly. If I'm going to accept, it has to be tonight. Sarah, please. How long do we have? She interrupted. If I say yes, how long before the wedding? Rowan's silence was answer enough. Grandfather. She turned to face him and she saw him flinch at whatever he read in her expression. How long? Sunrise, he whispered. Lord Corvus said if you agree, the ceremony must take place at sunrise. The Alpha King is already en route to Silverpine Forest. You would meet him at the ancient altar at dawn. Sarah's knees nearly buckled. Tomorrow? They expect me to marry him tomorrow? It's a power play. Rowan stood, crossing to her with the careful movements of age and sorrow. They want you off balance, terrified, with no time to prepare or reconsider. Cale Thornridge doesn't make offers, Sarah. He makes demands and crushes anyone who refuses. Then I won't refuse. The words came out stronger than she felt. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. Sarah cupped her grandfather's face, the way he'd done for her when she was small and frightened. You've protected me my whole life. Let me protect you now. Let me protect all of them. He'll break you, Rowan said, tears falling freely now. That man destroys everything he touches. Maybe? Sarah tried to smile. Or maybe I'll surprise him. She found Lyric an hour later, sitting on the roof of their small cottage, staring at the stars. Her sister took one look at Sarah's face and knew. You're going to do it, Lyric said. Not a question. Yes. I'll come with you. I won't let you face him alone. You'll stay here. Sarah climbed up to sit beside her sister, their shoulders touching the way they had since childhood. You'll help Grandfather. You'll take care of our people, and you'll remember that whatever happens to me, it was my choice. Lyric grabbed her hand fiercely. You're the bravest person I know. I'm the most terrified person you know, Sarah corrected. I'm just good at hiding it. They sat in silence as the moon climbed higher, and Sarah tried to memorize everything. The familiar sounds of the village, the scent of pine and wood smoke, the warmth of her sister's hand in hers. By sunrise, all of this would be memory. Tell me something, Lyric said softly. Do you think the stories are true? About what he is? Sarah had heard the whispers, the legends that traveled from pack to pack. That Cale Thornridge wasn't just an alpha, but something older. Something that had walked the earth before humans learned to fear the dark. I don't know, she admitted. I guess I'll find out. The hours before dawn passed too quickly and too slowly at once. Sarah bathed and dressed in the only formal gown she owned, a simple dress of deep green that had belonged to her mother. She braided her dark hair in the traditional style of an unmated female, weaving in sprigs of nightshade as was customary for a bride meeting her intended. Elder Rowan insisted on accompanying her, along with 6 of their strongest remaining hunters as witnesses. They traveled in silence through the pre-dawn darkness, following the ancient path to Silverpine Forest. The sacred grove appeared suddenly, a clearing where moonlight pooled like liquid silver between towering pines. At its center stood the altar, a massive stone carved with symbols that predated written language. And standing before that altar, absolutely motionless, was a figure that made every instinct Sarah possessed scream at her to run. Cale Thornridge was taller than any man she'd ever seen, his frame powerful in a way that suggested barely contained violence. He wore all black, from his leather boots to the long coat that moved around him like living shadow. His hair was dark as midnight, falling to his shoulders, and even from a distance, Sarah could see the sharp angles of his face, beautiful and cruel as a blade. But it was his stillness that truly frightened her. He didn't move, didn't acknowledge their approach. He simply stood there like a statue carved from darkness itself, radiating a presence that made the air feel heavy and hard to breathe. "Sweet mercy," one of the hunters whispered. "That's him?" Lord Corvus stepped from the shadows, his smile sharp. "His Majesty awaits his bride." Seraphina Ashmore approached the altar. Sarah's feet felt rooted to the ground. This was her last chance. She could run, could refuse, could condemn her pack, and flee into the forest. For one wild moment she actually considered it. Then Cale Thornridge's head turned, and his gaze found hers across the clearing. They were silver. Not gray or blue-gray, but true metallic silver that caught the moonlight and reflected it back like polished mirrors. They were the eyes of something that had never been entirely human, and they pinned her in place with the weight of an apex predator's stare. Sarah couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only stare into those impossible eyes and feel her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Then he spoke, and his voice was deep and cold and absolutely certain. "Come here, little wolf. Let's get this over with." Sarah's legs moved without conscious command, carrying her forward across ground that felt suddenly treacherous. Each step toward the altar was a step away from everything she'd ever known, and the man waiting for her looked like he'd never known warmth in his entire existence. Up close, Cale Thornridge was even more overwhelming. He towered over her by more than a foot, and this near, she could see the small scars that marked his hands, his throat, the sharp line of his jaw. Battle scars, she realized. This wasn't a king who ruled from a throne room. This was a warrior who'd carved his kingdom from the bones of his enemies. "You're younger than I expected." His metallic gaze traveled over her face with clinical assessment, as if she were a horse he was considering purchasing. "How old?" 19. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Something flickered in his expression, too fast for her to read. "Old enough to know what you're agreeing to?" "Old enough to save my pack from extinction." The words came out sharper than she intended, but she was tired of being afraid, tired of being powerless. If she was going to bind herself to this man forever, she'd do it with her spine straight and her head high. A muscle twitched in his jaw. Behind him, Lord Corvus cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, if we could proceed with the ceremony." "I'm speaking to my bride." Cale didn't look away from Sarah, but the temperature in the clearing seemed to drop 10 degrees. Corvus went silent immediately. Cale studied her for another long moment, and Sarah forced herself not to flinch under that penetrating stare. She'd heard that alphas could scent fear, that they fed on it like wolves on wounded prey. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. "You're afraid," he said finally, and Sarah's stomach sank. "But you're standing here anyway. Why?" "You know why." She lifted her chin. "Embervale falls if I refuse." "Embervale is already fallen." His words were brutal in their honesty. "Your pack is hanging by a thread. One bad winter, one sickness, one raid, and they're gone, regardless of what happens here today. So I'll ask again. Why are you really standing here?" Sarah's hands clenched into fists. "Because I won't let them fall alone. Because they're my family, my responsibility. Because..." She stopped, surprised by the heat of tears behind her eyes. "Because I'm all they have left." Something in Cale's expression shifted just fractionally. He searched her face, and for a heartbeat she thought she saw something almost human flicker in the depths of his stare. "Then understand this," he said quietly, his voice pitched for her ears alone. "Once we speak these vows, you belong to me. Not as chattel, not as political leverage, but as my mate in the eyes of every pack, every kingdom, every power that matters. There's no annulment, no divorce, no escape. You'll be Queen of Nighthaven, and that crown comes with blood on it." "I understand." Sarah met his eyes without wavering. "No, you don't." His hand moved suddenly, catching her chin and tilting her face up to his. His touch was fever-hot against her skin, and Sarah gasped at the sensation. "But you will." Before she could respond, he released her and turned to face the altar. "Begin the ceremony." Lord Corvus stepped forward, unfurling a scroll that glittered with official seals. "By the authority vested in me by the Council of Pax and witnessed by the representatives of Embervale, I call upon the ancient laws to bind these two souls in sacred union." Sarah barely heard the words. Her chin still burned where Cale had touched her, a heat that seemed to sink beneath her skin and spread through her blood. What was that? "Cale Thornridge, Alpha King of Nighthaven, do you claim this woman as your mate and queen?" "I do." No hesitation, no emotion, just two words that sealed Sarah's fate. "Seraphina Ashmore, last daughter of the Embervale bloodline, do you accept this claim and bind yourself to his rule?" This was it. The moment of no return. Sarah opened her mouth, and somewhere behind her, she heard her grandfather make a sound of pure anguish. "I do." The words hung in the air for a heartbeat, and then Cale's hand shot out, catching her wrist. Before Sarah could react, he'd drawn a small knife from his belt and drawn it across his palm, blood welling dark and red against his skin. "Old blood seals, old vows," he said, and slashed the blade across her palm as well. Sarah hissed at the sudden pain, but Kyle was already pressing their bleeding hands together, his fingers lacing through hers with surprising gentleness. The moment their blood mingled, something happened. Power surged between them like lightning, crackling up Sarah's arm and exploding through her chest. She gasped, staggering, but Cale's grip was iron, holding her upright as magic, ancient, wild, terrifying, roared through her veins. "What?" She tried to speak, but the words died as images flooded her mind. Not images. Memories. His memories. Flashes of violence and blood. A throne room lit by guttering torches. A man's face twisted with rage and madness. The weight of a crown settling on dark hair. Silver eyes staring out at an ocean of wolves, all of them bowing, submitting, accepting his dominance. And beneath it all, a loneliness so profound it was like staring into an abyss. Then it was over. Sarah stumbled backward, and Cale caught her around the waist with his free hand, steadying her. Their palms were still pressed together, blood drying between them, and she could feel his heartbeat through the contact. Strong, steady, impossibly fast. "What was that?" she whispered. "The bond." His voice was rough, strained in a way it hadn't been before. "It's done. You're mine now." Lord Corvus was staring at them with barely concealed shock. "The blood bond," he breathed. "I've never seen it manifest so strongly. Your Majesty, this is dismissed." Cale didn't look away from Sarah. "All of you. Return to Ashwood and inform the pack that their sovereignty has been restored. The bride comes with me." "Now?" Elder Rowan stepped forward, his voice shaking. "Your Majesty, please, let her say goodbye." She said her goodbyes. His gaze finally released Sarah, turning to pin her grandfather in place. "Or did you think I wouldn't know? That I wouldn't smell her tears on the wind, hear her sister's heartbreak from miles away?" He looked back at Sarah. You're very brave, little wolf. Or very foolish. I haven't decided which yet. Sarah found her voice. Let me embrace my family. 5 minutes. Surely you can spare that. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes, and for a moment, she thought he'd refuse. Then, impossibly, his mouth curved in something that might have been a smile if it had contained any warmth. 5 minutes, he agreed. Then we ride for Crimson Citadel. Don't make me come looking for you. He released her and stepped back, and Sarah nearly fell without his support. Her legs felt weak, her head spinning from whatever had just happened between them. The bond, he'd called it. She could still feel it, a strange new awareness at the back of her mind, like a door that had been opened and couldn't be closed. Rowan caught her in his arms, and Sarah let herself be small for just a moment, breathing in the familiar scent of pipe smoke and mountain pine that always clung to him. If he hurts you, her grandfather began, he won't. Sarah surprised herself with the certainty in her voice. She pulled back, looking into Rowan's weathered face. I saw something when our blood mixed. He's not what the stories say, or maybe he is, but there's more to it. She struggled for words. There's pain there. Old pain. Pain doesn't excuse cruelty. No, Sarah agreed, but it explains it. Lyric pushed forward, throwing her arms around Sarah's neck. I'll write every day, her sister whispered fiercely. And if you need me, if you need anything, I'll come. I don't care if he's a king or a monster or both. I'll come. I know you will. Sarah held her sister tight, memorizing the feel of her embrace. Take care of grandfather. Don't let him blame himself for this. I love you. I love you too. The 5 minutes passed far too quickly. When Cale's shadow fell over them, Sarah knew her time was up. She turned to face him, and something in her chest twisted at the expression on his face. He looked almost uncomfortable, as if witnessing this display of affection was foreign to him. It's time, he said simply. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. She let Kyle lead her away from her family, away from everything she'd ever known, toward the horses waiting at the edge of the clearing. His hand at the small of her back burned through the fabric of her dress, that same strange heat she'd felt before. He lifted her onto a massive black stallion with effortless strength, then mounted behind her. Sarah stiffened as his arms came around her to grasp the reins, caging her against his chest. Relax, he murmured, his breath stirring her hair. I can feel your fear. It's distracting. Then maybe you shouldn't have created a bond that lets you feel my emotions, Sarah shot back. To her shock, she felt rather than heard his laugh, a quiet rumble in his chest. Maybe not, he agreed, but it's done now. Hold on. The horse launched into motion, and Sarah gasped, grabbing onto Cale's arm for balance. They raced through the forest at a speed that should have been impossible in the darkness, but the stallion moved with supernatural grace, never faltering, never slowing. Behind them, Silver Pine Forest and everything Sarah had ever known disappeared into shadow. Ahead, the sky was beginning to lighten with the first hints of dawn, painting the horizon in shades of blood and gold. Where are we going? She asked. Home. Kyle's voice rumbled against her back. Crimson Citadel, you'll be safe there. Safe from what? His arms tightened fractionally around her. From everything except me. They rode in silence as the sun rose, and Sarah tried not to think about what awaited her in a fortress called Crimson, ruled by a king called Winter. Tried not to think about the strange heat that pulsed through her veins wherever their bodies touched. Tried not to think about the connection that now bound her to this dangerous, damaged man. Most of all, she tried not to think about the moment their blood had mixed, and she'd felt his loneliness like a physical blow. Because something told her that loneliness was the key to understanding Cale Thornridge, And whether she wanted to or not, she was going to spend the rest of her life trying to unlock that mystery. As if sensing her thoughts, Kale shifted behind her, and his voice came low and dark in her ear. "Whatever you're thinking, little wolf, stop. You can't save me. You can't fix me. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be for both of us." But Sarah had spent her whole life healing things that others had given up on. And as the sun climbed higher and Crimson Citadel appeared on the horizon like a dark crown against the sky, she made a silent vow of her own. She would uncover the truth about the Winter King. She would survive this marriage. And somehow, some way, she would find out what had broken the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories. Even if it killed her, Crimson Citadel rose from the mountainside like something carved from nightmare and ambition. Sarah had heard descriptions of the fortress. Everyone had. But words couldn't capture the sheer scale of it. Black stone walls climbed impossible heights, studded with towers that seemed to pierce the clouds themselves. Banners bearing Kale's sigil, a wolf's head circled by thorns, snapped in the mountain wind. But it was the gates that made Sarah's blood run cold. Massive iron barriers wrought in the shape of bared fangs and mounted above them. "Don't look," Kale said quietly, but it was too late. 3 heads, preserved by some dark art, stared down with empty eyes. The alphas who'd challenged Kale's rule, their final moments of terror frozen for eternity. "A reminder," Kale said, as the gates groaned open before them. "Mercy is weakness in this world. I learned that lesson young." Sarah forced herself to look away from the gruesome display as they passed beneath it. The courtyard beyond was chaos. Soldiers training, servants rushing between buildings, wolves in both human and animal form moving with purpose. Every eye turned to them as Kale's horse clattered across the stones, and Sarah felt the weight of hundreds of stares. "The Alpha King returns!" someone shouted, and within seconds a crowd had gathered. Kale dismounted in one fluid motion, then reached up to lift Sarah down. His hands spanned her waist easily, and that strange heat flared again where they touched. Their eyes met, and something flickered in his metallic gaze. Recognition, perhaps, of the same sensation she felt. "My people," Kale's voice carried across the courtyard with supernatural clarity. "I present Seraphina Thornridge, Queen of Nighthaven. Any who show her disrespect answer to me." The crowd fell to their knees as one, heads bowed. Sarah's heart hammered. Queen. She was a queen now, standing before hundreds of wolves who could tear her apart with their bare hands if their king commanded it. "Rise," Kale ordered. To Sarah, he said quietly, "Come. You need food and rest, and we need to talk." He led her through a maze of corridors, each more opulent than the last. Sarah glimpsed training rooms filled with weapons, libraries with shelves stretching to cathedral ceilings, dining halls that could seat hundreds. This wasn't just a fortress. It was a city unto itself. Finally, they reached a set of carved double doors. Kale pushed them open to reveal chambers that took Sarah's breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the mountains, their peaks still crowned with snow despite the summer season. A massive bed dominated one wall, its black silk coverings embroidered with silver thread. Tapestries depicting wolves and moonlight covered the stone walls, and a fireplace large enough to stand in crackled with welcoming warmth. "Your rooms," Kyle said, watching her reaction. "They connect to mine through that door." He gestured to a smaller entrance on the far wall. "You'll need attendants. I'll send Thalia. She's been with my household for decades and knows how things work here." "And what exactly do you expect from me?" Sarah turned to face him, exhaustion making her bold. "Am I supposed to smile and look pretty while you rule? Bear you heirs? What's my purpose here besides being a political pawn?" Kale's jaw tightened. "You're my mate, my queen. That means... It means nothing until you tell me what it means." Sarah moved closer, craning her neck to meet his eyes. You felt it too, didn't you? When our blood mixed. That connection. What was that? For the first time since she'd met him, Kale looked uncertain. He turned away, moving to the windows. The blood bond is ancient magic. It ties mates together, lets them sense each other's emotions, sometimes even share thoughts. It's meant to strengthen the connection between alphas and their chosen partners. And you didn't think to warn me before cutting my hand open? Would it have changed your answer? He glanced back at her. You were always going to say yes. For your pack, your family. Don't pretend otherwise. He was right, and Sarah hated him for it. So now we're connected. Forever. And I have no say in it. You had a say. Kale's voice went cold. You said I do. Everything else is consequence. Sarah's temper, already frayed by fear and exhaustion, finally snapped. Then tell me the consequences. Tell me what to expect from a husband who mounts heads on his gates and rules through terror. Tell me. Her voice broke despite her best efforts. Tell me if I should be afraid of you. The silence that followed was absolute. Kale stared at her, and Sarah watched emotions flicker across his face too fast to name. Finally, he crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides, stopping close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Yes, he said softly, you should be afraid of me. I've killed men for looking at me wrong. I've destroyed packs for breathing defiance. I am exactly what the stories say, Seraphina. A monster wearing a crown. Then why do I feel safe with you? The words escaped before Sarah could stop them. Kale went absolutely still. What? I can feel you. Sarah pressed a hand to her chest, where that strange awareness pulsed like a second heartbeat. And you're not what you're pretending to be. You're angry, and you're lonely, and you're... She broke off, shocked by her own boldness. Careful, little wolf. Kale's voice dropped to something dangerous. You're reading things that aren't there. Am I? Sarah held her ground even as every instinct screamed at her to retreat. Then prove it. Show me the monster. Make me afraid. It was a challenge no alpha could ignore, and Sarah knew it. His eyes flashed, brightening to something almost luminous. His hand shot out, catching her throat. Not squeezing, just holding, his palm hot against her pulse point. You want to see the monster? His voice had gone rough, inhuman. You want to know what I really am? Sarah's breath came quick and shallow, but she forced herself not to flinch. Yes. His eyes blazed brighter, and Sarah gasped as his pupils elongated, becoming distinctly wolfish. His teeth seemed sharper when he spoke. I'm not just an alpha, Seraphina. I'm something older, something that shouldn't exist. My father was a monster, and his father before him, and the curse runs in our blood like poison. What curse? Sarah whispered. The kings of Nighthaven don't just rule wolves. His hand slid from her throat to cup her jaw, tilting her face up. We are the wolves. Ancient spirits bound to human flesh by magic so old its origins are forgotten. We're stronger than normal shifters, faster, more dangerous. And the bond? His thumb brushed across her lower lip, and Sarah's heart stuttered. The blood bond with a true Nighthaven king is absolute. I can feel every emotion that crosses your mind. And you... He searched her face. You'll feel me too. My rage, my hunger, everything. Sarah's mind reeled. She'd married not just an alpha, but something from the old stories, the legends whispered about the first wolves that walked the earth. The hunger, she said slowly. What hunger? His expression turned predatory. For you. Before Sarah could respond, he leaned down, his nose brushing along the column of her throat. She froze, heart hammering as he inhaled deeply. The sound he made was barely human, a low growl that vibrated against her skin. "I can smell your fear," he murmured, lips brushing her pulse point. "But underneath it, there's something else. Something sweeter." "Cale." His name escaped as a breathless whisper. "Do you know what happens?" His mouth moved to her ear. "When a Nighthaven king claims his mate? It's not gentle. It's not civilized. The wolf takes what it wants, marks what belongs to it. And right now..." His teeth grazed her earlobe, sending electricity down her spine. "Right now, every instinct I have is screaming at me to mark you, to make sure every wolf in this citadel knows you're mine." Sarah's hands came up to his chest. Whether to push him away or pull him closer, she wasn't sure. She could feel his heart racing beneath her palms, as fast as her own. "Then why don't you?" The question hung between them, charged with something Sarah didn't fully understand. Cale pulled back just enough to look at her, and the conflict in his eyes made her chest ache. "Because," he said roughly, "once I start, I won't be able to stop. And you're already afraid enough." "I'm not afraid of you," Sarah said, and realized it was true. Terrified of the situation, yes. Overwhelmed by everything that had happened, absolutely. But Cale himself? The man who held such iron control despite the supernatural hunger she could see burning in his eyes? That man didn't frighten her. "You should be." But his hand was gentle as it slid into her hair, cradling the back of her head. "You should run from me, Seraphina. While you still can." "It's too late for that." Sarah's fingers curled into his shirt. "We're bonded. You said so yourself. There's no running from this." Something in Cale's expression cracked, and before Sarah could process what was happening, his mouth crashed down on hers. The kiss was nothing like she'd imagined a first kiss should be. It was fierce and demanding and tasted of desperation, as if he were drowning and she were air. Sarah gasped against his lips, and Cale took advantage, deepening the kiss until she was dizzy with it. His arms banded around her waist, pulling her flush against him, and Sarah could feel the inhuman heat radiating from his body. That strange warmth she'd felt before exploded into an inferno, racing through her veins and pooling low in her belly. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kyle rested his forehead against hers. "This is wrong," he muttered, though his hands were still clenched in the fabric of her dress. "You're 19. Innocent. I shouldn't." "I'm your wife," Sarah interrupted, her voice shaking. "And I'm not as innocent as you think. I know what happens between mates." Cale laughed, the sound bitter. "You know nothing, little wolf. Nothing about what I want to do to you. What the wolf wants." He cut himself off with a curse, stepping back and running his hands through his dark hair. "This is why I tried to stay away from you on the ride here. The bond makes everything harder. Makes me want things I have no right to want." Sarah touched her lips, still tingling from his kiss. Her mind was a chaos of sensation and confusion, but beneath it all, their connection pulsed with awareness. She sensed Cale's desire, yes, but also his restraint, his genuine concern for her, his fear of becoming the monster he'd described. "What if I want those things too?" The words escaped before her courage failed. His eyes snapped to hers, blazing silver. "Don't say that." "Why not?" "Because it's inconvenient? Because you're trying to be noble?" Sarah moved closer, emboldened by something she couldn't name. "I felt what you felt when our blood mixed, Cale. You're lonely. You've been alone in this citadel for 15 years, surrounded by wolves who fear you, ruling through strength because it's the only thing you trust. And now you have a mate, someone who's supposed to be your equal, and you're trying to push me away before we even begin." "I'm trying to protect you," Kyle ground out. "From me." "Maybe I don't want to be protected." Sarah reached up, cupping his face the way he'd done to hers. His skin was fever-hot beneath her palms. Maybe I want to understand you instead. For a heartbeat, Cale leaned into her touch, his eyes drifting closed. He looked younger like this, more vulnerable, and Sarah felt her heart twist with an emotion she wasn't ready to name. Then his eyes opened and they were blazing gold, not silver anymore, but molten gold that seemed to glow with inner fire. Cale, Sarah's voice came out strangled. Your eyes? Run. The word was barely human, more growl than speech. Run now, Seraphina. Before I do something we'll both regret. But Sarah was frozen, transfixed by the transformation happening before her. Cale's canines had lengthened into fangs, his nails darkening into claws. His body seemed to vibrate with barely contained power, as if something enormous was trying to break free from his skin. I can't. His voice broke. The wolf wants. You smell like. He shook his head violently, as if trying to clear it. Get out. Now. Sarah stumbled backward, but before she could reach the door, Cale moved. One moment he was across the room, the next he had her pressed against the wall, his body caging hers. One hand braced beside her head, the other pressed flat against the stone, and Sarah could hear the cracking of rock beneath his palm. I'm sorry, he whispered, and Sarah wasn't sure if he was apologizing for what he'd done or what he was about to do. I'm so sorry. Then his mouth found the curve of her neck where it met her shoulder, and his fangs sank deep into her flesh. Sarah screamed. Not from pain, though there was pain, sharp and bright and shocking. But the pain was immediately drowned by something else, a wave of sensation so intense it drove the breath from her lungs. Heat exploded through her veins, radiating out from the bite in pulsing waves that made her knees buckle. Cale held her up effortlessly, one arm wrapping around her waist as he drank. Sarah could feel his satisfaction, his desperate need, the way her blood seemed to feed something wild and ancient in him. And beneath the fear and shock and overwhelming sensation, Sarah felt something else. A sense of rightness, as if this was what their connection had been reaching toward all along. As if his mark on her skin was completing something fundamental between them. When Cale finally pulled back, his mouth was stained with her blood. His eyes were still gold, still wild, but there was horror in them now as they focused on her face. What did you do? Sarah whispered, her hand flying to her neck. She could feel the wound, deep and clean, already beginning to heal with supernatural speed. I marked you. Kyle's voice was raw, destroyed. The mating mark. I didn't mean to. I tried to fight it. He stepped back, staring at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. I'm sorry. God, Seraphina, I'm so sorry. But Sarah wasn't listening, because something was happening to her, something impossible. The mark on her neck was burning, spreading heat through her entire body. And with that heat came power, wild, primal power that made her gasp and stumble. What's happening to me? She looked down at her hands and saw them beginning to glow with a faint golden light. Shock registered across his features. That's not possible. What's not possible? Sarah's voice rose in panic as the glow intensified. Cale, what did you do to me? The mark. He moved toward her, catching her as her legs gave out. It shares my power with you. That's what the mating mark does. But you're human. You shouldn't be able to. He broke off as Sarah convulsed in his arms, her back arching as something enormous and terrible moved beneath her skin. She could feel it, a presence in her mind that hadn't been there before. Ancient and wild and achingly familiar. No, Kyle breathed, his arms tightening around her. No, this can't be happening. Make it stop, Sarah pleaded, tears streaming down her face. Please, Cale, make it stop. I can't. His voice broke. Serafina, I don't know how. This has never happened before. The mark shouldn't awaken anything in a human. You should just heal faster. Be stronger. Not. He cursed in a language she didn't recognize. Not this. Not what? Sarah gasped out between waves of pain and power. What's happening to me? Kyle looked down at her, and in his golden eyes Sarah saw wonder and terror in equal measure. You're transforming, he whispered. The mark is turning you into one of us. Into a wolf. Sarah's scream echoed through the citadel as her world shattered and reformed, and the last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Kale's face, twisted with guilt and something that might have been grief. Then there was nothing but the fire in her veins and the howl of something ancient waking up inside her soul. Sarah woke to silver moonlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the sensation of silk sheets against her bare skin. For a moment she lay perfectly still, trying to remember where she was and why every nerve in her body felt like it had been struck by lightning. Then it all came flooding back. The mark. Kale's fangs in her throat. The terrible, burning transformation that had torn through her like wildfire. She sat up abruptly, and the world exploded into overwhelming sensation. She could hear everything. Guards walking 3 floors below, wind whistling through arrow slits in distant towers, the heartbeats of a dozen wolves somewhere in the citadel. She could smell everything too, stone and steel, blood and sweat. And underneath it all, a scent that made something in her chest purr with recognition. Pine and winter frost and something wild. Kale. You're awake. Sarah's head whipped toward the voice, and she found him sitting in a chair by the fireplace, watching her with those impossible eyes. He looked haggard, as if he hadn't slept in days, dark circles shadowing his sharp features. How long? Her voice came out rough, and she was shocked by the sound of it, richer somehow, carrying an undertone of something predatory. 3 days. Kale stood, moving toward the bed with careful slowness, as if approaching a spooked animal. Your body was fighting the change, I thought. He stopped, jaw clenching. I thought I'd killed you. Sarah looked down at herself, at hands that seemed the same, but felt fundamentally different. She was wearing a silk nightgown she didn't remember putting on, and when she touched her neck, she found smooth skin where the bite should have been. Only a faint scar remained, raised and sensitive. What am I now? She whispered. A shifter. Kyle stopped at the edge of the bed, hands clenched at his sides as if restraining himself from reaching for her. The mark shared my power with you, but your body had latent wolf blood. It must have been dormant for generations in the Ashmore line, waiting for a catalyst. My bite awakened it. Wolf blood? Sarah's mind reeled. That's impossible. The Ashmore line is human. We've always been human. Somewhere in your ancestry, there was a wolf. His gaze searched her face. And now that blood has manifested, you're one of us, Serafina. A true shifter, bonded to an ancient king. Do you understand what that means? That I can never go home. The words came out flat, emotionless, but Sarah felt grief clawing at her throat. My family won't recognize what I've become. You are home. Kale's voice was quiet but firm. Nighthaven is your home now. These wolves are your pack. And I... He stopped himself, jaw working. I am responsible for what you've become. Sarah looked at him, really looked at him, and she felt his guilt like a physical weight. You didn't mean for this to happen. That doesn't change what I did. Kale turned away. I marked you without permission, turned you into something you never asked to be. You should hate me. I don't. The words surprised Sarah as much as they seemed to surprise him. She slid off the bed, her new body moving with a grace she'd never possessed before. I should. But I can feel you, Kale. Your guilt, your fear, and underneath it all, she moved closer. Your loneliness. Stop. His voice was strained. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Sarah reached out, her hand hovering over his shoulder. She didn't touch him, but she could feel the heat radiating from his body. You've been alone for 15 years, and now you finally have someone who can't run from you, someone who's bound to you by magic and blood, and you're terrified of destroying me the way your father destroyed your mother. Cale spun to face her, his eyes blazing. How do you— I saw your memories when our blood mixed. Your father. Your mother. What his mark did to her. For a long moment, Cale just stared at her. Then his shoulders sagged, and he looked more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. Then you know why I'm terrified. My mother survived the mark for 3 years before it consumed her. She burned out from the inside, and I— His voice broke. I watched her die screaming, and I was too young, too weak to help her. And now, I've done the same thing to you. I'm not your mother. Sarah finally closed the distance between them, taking his hands in hers. Their connection flared to life, and she felt his surprise at how strong she felt. The mark awakened something in me, Cale. Something that was always there. I'm not burning out. I'm becoming what I was always meant to be. You don't know that. Neither do you. She squeezed his hands. So instead of assuming the worst, why don't we see what happens? Together. Before Cale could respond, a sharp knock sounded at the door. His expression immediately shifted, the vulnerable man disappearing behind the mask of the Winter King. Enter, he commanded. A lean man with dark hair shot through with silver stepped into the room. His eyes widened slightly when they landed on Sarah. Your Majesty and— my queen. You're awake. Darius. Cale's voice was hard. What's happened? Trouble at the eastern border. Someone sent soldiers across our territory. They're claiming it was an accident, but— Darius's gaze flickered to Sarah again. They were specifically asking about the human bride. The one you just married. Ice flooded Sarah's veins. Why would they want me? Because word has spread. Darius's tone was grim. The Winter King has taken a mate. And there are those who see that as an opportunity to test your strength. Or exploit a potential weakness. How many soldiers? Cale's voice went deadly quiet. 50, maybe more. The patrol is holding them back, but they're outnumbered. Cale was already moving toward his weapons. Ready, my guard, we ride within the hour. Cale, wait. Sarah grabbed his arm. This is a trap. They want you to rush out angry and reckless. He looked down at her, and something in his expression softened fractionally. They've invaded my territory and threatened my mate. I won't hide behind these walls. I'm not asking you to hide. Sarah lifted her chin. I'm asking you to take me with you. Absolutely not. I'm not weak anymore. She pulled her hand back and felt power surge beneath her skin. Golden light flickered around her fingers, and both men stared. Whatever I'm becoming, it's more than just a wolf. The mark gave me something else. Something I can feel, but don't understand yet. Which is exactly why you're staying here. Cale's voice was firm. You don't know how to control your power. You don't know how to fight. And I won't risk— You don't get to decide that. Sarah's eyes blazed. I'm your queen, remember? You're equal. Not some fragile thing to be locked away for safekeeping. Darius cleared his throat. She has a point, Cale. And if they're specifically asking about her, bringing her might give us an advantage they don't expect. Kyle looked between them, clearly torn. She felt his warring instincts, the need to protect her battling with his recognition that she was right. Fine, he finally ground out, but you stay close to me. And if I tell you to run, you run. Understood? Sarah smiled, feeling her new fangs press against her lip. Understood. They rode out within the hour, 20 wolves flanking them on all sides. Sarah wore leather armor that Darius had provided, supple and light, dyed the deep crimson of Nighthaven's colors. Cale had armed her with a silver dagger, though they both knew her real weapon was the power thrumming beneath her skin. The eastern border was several hours' hard ride through mountain passes and dense forest. With every mile, Sarah felt her new senses sharpening. She could smell the wolves around her, distinguish each individual scent. She could hear their whispered conversations, feel the nervous energy crackling through the group. But most of all, she could feel Cale. He rode beside her, his presence a constant warmth at the edge of her awareness, and his fear for her was palpable despite his controlled expression. "Tell me what to expect," she said as they crested a ridge. "A fight." Cale's voice was grim. "Whoever sent these soldiers wants blood. They'll have poisoned weapons, wolf's bane extract. One cut and most shifters are paralyzed within minutes." Most shifters? The ancient bloodlines are more resistant. But even I can be overwhelmed if they dose me enough. His hand moved to his sword hilt. "That's why you need to stay back if it comes to combat." "And if I can help?" Kyle looked at her, his silver eyes searching her face. "Then help. But don't try to be a hero, Serafina. I've ruled for 15 years without anyone to worry about. I don't know how to fight and protect someone at the same time." "Then don't protect me." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Trust me to protect myself." Before he could respond, one of the scouts ahead raised a hand in warning. They'd reached the border. The valley below was in chaos. Nighthaven wolves in their battle forms fought against soldiers in dark armor, and even from a distance, Sarah could see the unnatural sheen on their weapons. Poison blades. "There are more than 50, Darius said grimly. "Closer to 100. Cale's expression went cold. "Then we even the odds. Darius, take half our force and flank from the north. I'll hit them from the south." "What about the Queen?" "She's with me." Cale looked at Sarah. "Last chance to stay back." "Not a chance." Sarah drew her dagger, feeling power surge in response. "Let's show them what happens when they threaten Nighthaven." The battle was brutal and chaotic. Sarah found herself in the thick of it within moments, her body moving on pure instinct. She was faster than the soldiers, stronger than she had any right to be. Her dagger found gaps in armor with supernatural precision. But it was when the first soldier's poisoned blade grazed her arm that everything changed. Pain exploded through her limb, and Sarah stumbled. The soldier grinned, raising his sword for a killing blow. "Not so tough now, little queen." His words cut off as golden light erupted from Sarah's wound. Not just light, healing magic, pure and ancient, burning away the poison before it could spread. The soldier's expression morphed to terror as Sarah straightened, her wound already closing. "My turn," she said, and struck. Around the battlefield, poisoned wolves began to glow with the same golden light. Sarah didn't understand how, but somehow her healing magic was spreading, burning away poison wherever it touched. Wounded shifters rose renewed, fighting with coordinated precision. "Impossible!" someone shouted. "She's healing them." Kyle appeared at her side, his fur matted with blood but his eyes blazing with pride. He shifted back to human form just long enough to say, "You're magnificent." Then the enemy soldiers broke and ran, fleeing into the forest, leaving behind their wounded and weapons in their haste to escape. As silence fell over the valley, Sarah collapsed to her knees, exhausted. She'd never used so much power at once. Every muscle trembled and her vision swam. "Sarah!" Kyle caught her before she hit the ground. "You overdid it. You need to rest." "Did we win?" she whispered. "We won." He pressed his forehead to hers. You won. Whatever that power is, it changes everything. Darius appeared, looking between them with a mix of shock and calculation. The Queen can heal poison, the weapon that's been devastating our people for years. She can cure it. Kale's arms tightened around Sarah, which means she just became the most valuable person in the Northern Territories. And the most dangerous target. Sarah wanted to respond, but exhaustion pulled at her consciousness. The last thing she heard before darkness claimed her was Kale's voice, rough with emotion. "I've got you, little wolf. You're safe. I promise you're safe." And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, Sarah believed him. Sarah woke in her chambers at Crimson Citadel with sunlight streaming through the windows. For a moment she lay still, taking inventory. Her body ached, but the exhaustion from the battle was gone. And her arm, where the poisoned blade had cut her, there wasn't even a scar. "You heal faster now." Kale's voice came from the chair by the window. One of the benefits of being bonded to an ancient bloodline. Sarah sat up, pulling the silk sheet around her. "How long was I asleep?" 2 days. He rose and moved to pour water from a pitcher. "Your body needed time to recover from using so much magic at once. Thalia says you're lucky you didn't burn yourself out completely." "Thalia?" "An ancient healer who's been with my household for decades. She's been monitoring you throughout your recovery." Kale brought her the water, and Sarah noticed the dark circles under his eyes. She also confirmed what Darius suspected. "Your healing magic isn't just normal pack healing, it's something older, something from the first wolves." Sarah drank deeply, her throat parched. The first wolves? Before the pack split into different bloodlines, there were the originals. Wolves who walked with gods and wielded magic as naturally as breathing. Kale sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to touch her. That power has been diluted over generations, but sometimes it resurfaces in descendants. Usually only in tiny amounts. But you, he shook his head. You have it in full measure. That's what the mark awakened in your ancient Ashmore bloodline. So I'm what? Some kind of ancient wolf reborn? You're the most powerful healer in the Northern Territories. Kale's voice was grim. Which means every enemy we have will want you dead or captured. The battle at the border was just the beginning. Before Sarah could respond, rapid knocking sounded at the door. Darius entered without waiting for permission, his face pale. "We have a problem." A raven just arrived from Iron Spire. He hesitated. From Lord Corvus Ashford himself. Sarah's blood ran cold at the name. What does he want? He's calling for a peace summit. Claims he wants to negotiate an end to hostilities between the human kingdoms and the wolf packs. Darius's expression made it clear what he thought of that. He's specifically requesting both your Majesty's presence, the King and the Queen of Nighthaven. It's a trap, Sarah said immediately. Obviously, Kale agreed. But refusing would make us look weak. Like we're afraid of the humans. Are we? Sarah challenged. After what we just did to their soldiers? We defeated 100 men. Darius's voice was heavy. Intelligence suggests Corvus has access to thousands, and according to our spies, he's been working with someone powerful, someone who wants the wolf packs destroyed completely. Who? Kale demanded. We don't know yet. But whoever they are, they've been stockpiling Wolf's Bane for years, enough to poison every shifter in the Northern Territories. Darius met Kale's eyes. Until the Queen demonstrated she can cure it. Now their entire strategy is useless. So they'll change strategies, Sarah said slowly. Find another way to kill us. Which is why this summit is dangerous. Kyle stood, pacing. They'll have had time to plan something new. Something we won't see coming. Then we don't go. Sarah rose as well, surprised by how steady her legs felt. We send an emissary. Show them we're not afraid. but we're not stupid either. That might work, Darius said thoughtfully. If we... No. Kyle cut him off. They specifically requested the queen. If we refuse, they'll know we're protecting her. They'll know she's our weakness. I'm not a weakness, Sarah said quietly. You're the only thing in this world I can't afford to lose. Kale's voice was raw. That makes you a weakness, Seraphina. My weakness. The admission hung in the air between them. Sarah felt the depth of his fear, not for himself, but for her. And underneath it, something else. Something that might have been love, if he'd let himself feel it. Then we need to make me a strength instead. Sarah moved to the wardrobe, pulling out riding clothes. We go to this summit. But we go prepared. We show them that the king and queen of Nighthaven are not to be trifled with. You don't understand what you're suggesting, Kale said. If this is truly a trap, then we spring it and survive. Sarah turned to face him, her eyes blazing with determination. You've spent 15 years ruling through fear, Kale. Always alone, always isolated. But you're not alone anymore. So stop trying to protect me from the throne I earned when I became your mate and start treating me like the queen I am. Silence fell. Darius looked between them, clearly trying not to smile. Kale stared at Sarah, emotions warring across his face. Finally, he inclined his head. As you wish, my queen. We'll attend the summit. Together. Good. Sarah began dressing, her movements efficient. When is it? 1 week hence, Darius said, at the ruins of Starfall. Neutral ground. Then we have 1 week to prepare. Sarah fastened the last buckle on her leather vest and turned to face them both. Let's make sure whoever's behind this regrets ever challenging Nighthaven. The week passed in a blur of training and preparation. Thalia worked with Sarah daily, helping her understand and control her healing magic. It wasn't just about curing poison. Sarah could heal wounds, cure sickness, even ease pain with a touch. The power comes from your compassion, Thalia explained one afternoon, as Sarah successfully healed a wolf's broken leg. The first wolves were guardians as well as predators. They protected their packs not just with strength, but with magic. You carry that legacy in your ancient bloodline. Sarah flexed her glowing hands, marveling at the golden light. Can all wolves with ancient blood do this? Some can heal small wounds. A few can sense illness. Thalia's weathered face was serious. But what you can do? Curing Wolf's bane, healing mortal wounds, spreading your power to others? That's unique. That's why you're so dangerous to our enemies. At night, Kale came to her chambers, not to her bed. He still kept that line carefully drawn, but to sit by the fire and talk. He told her about his childhood, about watching his father's madness grow, about the terrible choice he'd faced at 20 years old. I killed him in front of the entire court, Kale said one night, staring into the flames. My own father. And when his blood was still wet on my hands, I took his crown and dared anyone to challenge me. You saved your people, Sarah said quietly. I became the monster everyone feared. He looked at her, his silver eyes full of old pain. That's why I never took a mate. Why I never let anyone close. Because the kings of Nighthaven don't love, Seraphina. We consume. We destroy. And I refuse to do to someone else what my father did to my mother. But you haven't destroyed me. Sarah moved to sit beside him. I'm stronger now than I was before. The mark didn't break me. It completed me. You don't know that yet. But his hand found hers, their fingers lacing together. The mark's effects can take years to fully manifest. Then I guess we'll find out together. Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling his warmth. You keep trying to push me away, Kale. But it's not working. I'm not afraid of you. I'm not going to break. and I'm certainly not going anywhere. She felt him sigh, his arm coming around her shoulders. You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met. Good thing you married me then. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to embers. And Sarah thought that maybe, just maybe, they were going to be okay. The night before they were to leave for Starfall, Sarah couldn't sleep. She stood on her balcony, looking out at the mountains, trying to ignore the knot of anxiety in her stomach. Second thoughts. Kale's voice came from the doorway. Third and fourth thoughts? Sarah didn't turn around. This is insane, isn't it? Walking into an obvious trap? Completely insane. Kyle moved to stand beside her. Which is why I'm bringing 50 wolves instead of 20, and why Darius is riding ahead with scouts to survey the ruins before we arrive. That won't be enough if they're serious about killing us. No. His hand covered hers on the balcony railing. But your power might be. If you can heal our wolves faster than they can poison them, we have a chance. Sarah looked down at their joined hands. I'm scared. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Kale turned her to face him. But don't let it control you. You've already proven you're stronger than anyone expected. Including me. What if I'm not strong enough? Then we die together. His thumb brushed across her cheek. But I don't plan on dying tomorrow, Serafina. And neither should you. He leaned down and kissed her, and Sarah rose on her toes to meet him halfway. It was different from their first kiss, less desperate, more tender. A promise, rather than a claiming. When they broke apart, Kale rested his forehead against hers. Come back to bed. You need rest. Will you stay? The words slipped out before Sarah could stop them. Just to sleep. I don't want to be alone tonight. Something flickered in Kale's eyes. Are you sure? I'm sure. They lay together in her massive bed, Sarah tucked against Kale's side, his arm wrapped protectively around her. She could hear his heartbeat beneath her ear, steady and strong. Kale, she whispered, if something happens tomorrow, nothing will happen. But if it does, she lifted her head to look at him. I want you to know that I don't regret any of this. Not the marriage, not the mark, not becoming your mate. You gave me a purpose bigger than just surviving. You made me a queen. Kale's hand came up to cup her face, his expression more open than she'd ever seen it. You were always a queen, Serafina. I just gave you a kingdom. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Sarah felt heat building between them. But before it could go further, Kale pulled back with a rueful smile. Sleep. We have a long ride tomorrow. Sarah settled back against his chest, feeling safer than she had in weeks. Whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. And that was enough. The ruins of Starfall rose from the landscape like broken teeth, ancient stones that jutted from a barren plateau. Sarah had expected something grand, but this was just empty, desolate. The perfect place for an ambush. I don't like this, Darius muttered, his hand on his sword hilt. The scouts reported minimal activity. Too minimal. Which means they're hiding. Kyle's eyes scanned the horizon. Sarah, stay close. If anything happens. I know. We've been over this. Sarah touched the dagger at her belt, feeling her power humming beneath her skin, ready to be called forth. They'd brought 100 wolves this time, a significant force, but still nowhere near enough if Corvus had brought an army. The wolves fanned out as they approached the ruins, moving with practiced coordination. As they passed between two standing stones that marked the entrance to the ancient site, Sarah felt something wrong. A prickling at the base of her skull, a sense of being watched. Kale, she began. Then the world exploded. Soldiers poured from behind every stone, from trenches dug into the plateau, from concealed positions all around them. Not 100, not even 1,000. Thousands. Sarah's heart stopped as she realized the scope of the trap. They were completely surrounded. Ambush! Kyle roared, already shifting into his massive wolf form. Around them, his wolves did the same, forming a protective circle around Sarah. But it was futile. For every enemy they cut down, 2 more appeared. And worse, these soldiers weren't using Wolf's Bane. They had something new. Sarah watched in horror as one of Kale's wolves fell, not from poison, but from a strange paralysis that spread from where a projectile had struck him. "What is that?" she shouted to Darius. "I don't know." He was bleeding from a dozen cuts, fighting desperately. "Some kind of dart." More wolves fell. The paralysis was instant and total. They weren't dead, but they couldn't move, couldn't fight. And without them, Sarah's protective circle was shrinking fast. She felt Kale's rage and desperation. He was cutting through enemies with brutal efficiency, but there were too many. They were going to be overwhelmed. "Sarah!" Kyle's mental voice crashed into her consciousness. "You have to run. Now." "I won't leave you." "You have to." His physical form was bleeding from a dozen wounds, his movements slowing. "One of us has to survive to warn." He never finished. 3 darts struck him simultaneously, and Nighthaven's Winter King collapsed mid-lunge, his massive form hitting the ground hard. "Kale!" Sarah's scream tore from her throat. A figure emerged from the ranks of soldiers, clapping slowly. Lord Corvus Ashford, his smile cruel and satisfied. "Magnificent," he said. "The mighty Winter King, brought low by simple chemistry. Did you really think I'd make the same mistake twice, girl? Wolf's Bane can be cured by your little gift. But this?" He held up one of the darts. "This is pure paralytic. No magic can touch it. No healing can cure it." Sarah's mind raced. She could sense Kale. He was alive, conscious, but completely immobilized. Around her, the last of the standing wolves fell. "It's over," Corvus continued, walking closer. "The Winter King is finished. The wolf packs will be scattered. And you?" His eyes gleamed with malicious intent. "You're going to watch him die, knowing you failed to save him." "No." Sarah's voice was quiet, but something in her tone made Corvus stop. "No?" He laughed. "Girl, you're surrounded by 5,000 soldiers. Your wolves are down. Your king is paralyzed. What exactly do you think you can do?" Sarah looked at Kale's fallen form, felt his fury and fear. Looked at the wolves who'd fought to protect her, now helpless on the ground. Looked at Corvus, so certain of his victory. And she made a choice. "This," she said, and reached for the power inside her. Not just her healing magic. Not just the wolf strength the mark had given her. She reached for their connection itself, for that bond to Kale that ran deeper than blood or magic. And she pulled. Power exploded from her like a shock wave, golden light so bright that soldiers screamed and covered their eyes. Sarah felt it racing through her, into Kyle, into every fallen wolf connected to their pack. But she didn't just heal them. She gave them her strength, her power, her absolute refusal to let them fall. Kale's eyes snapped open, blazing with borrowed magic. The paralysis that should have kept him down for hours burned away in seconds as Sarah's power flooded him. Around them, every fallen wolf began to glow with the same golden light, the paralytic dissolving from their systems like ice in sunlight. "Impossible!" Corvus stumbled backward, his confidence crumbling. "That's not... You can't..." Kyle rose, his massive wolf form now wreathed in golden flame. "What did you do?" His mental voice was full of wonder. "I shared everything," Sarah gasped, feeling the strain of maintaining the connection to so many wolves at once. "I don't know how long I can hold it." Then we'd better make it count. What happened next would be spoken of in legends for generations. The wolves of Nighthaven, empowered by their queen's ancient magic, tore through Corvus's forces like a wildfire through dead wood. Every wound healed almost as fast as it was inflicted. Every fallen wolf rose renewed. They were unstoppable. Corvus's soldiers broke and ran, fleeing in terror from an enemy they couldn't kill. Most scattered into the wilderness, but Nighthaven wolves were faster. Within minutes, the plateau was littered with the dead and wounded, and Lord Corvus himself was backing away, looking for an escape. But he found himself surrounded, cut off from retreat by wolves who'd encircled him. Going somewhere? Sarah's voice carried across the battlefield, amplified by her power. Corvus spun to face her, reaching for a weapon, but Kale was there in an instant. He shifted back to human form, one hand at Corvus's throat, lifting the man off his feet. "You made a grave mistake," Kale said quietly. "You threatened my mate, my queen, and now you're going to tell me everything. Who planned this? Who's been stockpiling poison and weapons? Who wants the wolf packs destroyed?" "Go to hell," Corvus spat. Kale's grip tightened and Corvus began to choke. "Wrong answer." "Kale, wait." Sarah approached, her power still blazing around her. She could feel it draining her, burning through her reserves, but she held on. "Let me try something." She placed her glowing hand on Corvus's forehead, and suddenly she was inside his mind. Not just surface thoughts, deeper. Memories, plans, conspiracies. She saw it all. The mysterious benefactor who'd approached Corvus years ago. The promises of power and wealth. The systematic campaign to turn the human kingdoms against the wolves. And at the center of it all, a name. Prince Aldrich of Ironspire. The king's eldest son, next in line for the throne. Sarah pulled back, gasping. "It's Prince Aldrich. He's been planning this for years. He wants to unite the human kingdoms under his rule by making the wolves a common enemy." The prince? Darius had appeared, bloodied but alive. But why? "Because his father made peace with us," Kale said grimly, "and Aldrich sees that as weakness. He wants to prove he's stronger than his father by doing what the old king never could, wiping out the wolf packs completely." "There's more," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "He knows about me, about what I can do. He's already planning his next move. An army. 30,000 strong, marching within the month." She never finished. The strain of holding so much power, of healing and strengthening 100 wolves simultaneously, finally became too much. The golden light flickered and died, and Sarah collapsed. Kale dropped Corvus instantly, catching Sarah before she hit the ground. "Seraphina, stay with me." "I'm okay," she whispered, but her vision was swimming. "Just used too much." "You used everything." Kale's voice was rough with emotion. "You gave us all your strength. You saved us all." He looked up at Darius. "Secure Corvus. We're taking him back to Crimson Citadel for questioning. Get our wounded ready to move. We leave immediately." "What about the prince?" Darius asked. Kale's expression went cold and deadly. "Let him come. After what he tried to do today, after what he planned to do to my mate, I'm going to enjoy destroying him." The journey back to Crimson Citadel took 3 days with their wounded. Corvus was bound and guarded, though he remained defiant. Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness, her body struggling to recover from the massive power drain. When she finally woke fully on the 3rd day, she was back in her chambers. Kale sat beside her bed, holding her hand, his expression haggard. "You scared me," he said quietly when he saw her eyes open. "You've been unconscious for days." "What happened?" Sarah tried to sit up, but her body felt like lead. "Did Corvus is being interrogated as we speak," Kale helped her sit, propping pillows behind her. He's told us everything he knows about Aldrich's plans. The human prince has been building this conspiracy for years, using Corvus as his puppet. And now? Now Corvus will stand trial before the Council of Pax. Kale's jaw tightened. He won't survive it. What he did, attacking under a peace banner using forbidden weapons, those are capital crimes. He chose his fate when he chose to serve Aldrich. Sarah processed this. Part of her wanted to feel sympathy for Corvus, but she remembered the glee in his eyes as he'd watched Kale fall. And Prince Aldrich has declared war. Kale's voice was flat. Official proclamation arrived yesterday. He's calling the wolf packs a threat to human civilization and demanding that all kingdoms join him in wiping us out. How many are listening? Too many. Kyle looked exhausted. The smaller kingdoms are afraid. They're joining Aldrich's coalition. Within weeks, we'll be facing the combined armies of 5 human kingdoms. Maybe more. How many soldiers is that? 30,000? Possibly more. He squeezed her hand. Against our 3,000 wolves across all the northern territories. Sarah's blood ran cold. Those odds are impossible. I know. Kale's voice was heavy. I've been calling every pack leader, every alpha I can reach. Some are willing to fight. Others want to flee north, abandon our lands entirely. And some. He stopped, shaking his head. Some want to surrender you. They think if we give Aldrich the healer queen, he'll leave the rest of us alone. Would he? No. But desperate people believe desperate lies. Kale's silver eyes met hers. I won't give you up, Seraphina. No matter what any alpha demands, you're my mate, my queen, and I'd burn the world before I let anyone take you from me. The fierce possessiveness in his voice sent heat through Sarah's chest. So what do? We fight. We gather every wolf who's willing. We prepare for the biggest war our kind has seen in centuries. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. And we hope that whatever power you showed at Starfall can be used again. Because without it, we don't stand a chance. Before Sarah could respond, the door burst open. A young wolf, breathless and wide-eyed, stumbled in. Your Majesty, my queen, you need to come quickly. He gulped air. There's something happening in the courtyard. Wolves from across the territories. Hundreds of them. And they're all asking for the queen. Kale was on his feet instantly, his hand moving to his sword. Is it a challenge? An uprising? No, sire. They want to pledge loyalty. To her. Sarah and Kale exchanged glances. Help me up, she said. You're too weak. Help me up, Kyle. If wolves are coming to pledge loyalty, I need to be there to accept it. He helped her into a robe, and together they made their way to the main courtyard. What they found took Sarah's breath away. Hundreds of wolves filled the space, more arriving every minute, all of them kneeling with their heads bowed, the gesture of absolute submission and loyalty. What's happening? Sarah whispered. An elderly alpha rose from the crowd, his weathered face solemn. Word has spread, Your Majesty, of what you did at Starfall. How you saved 100 wolves from certain death. How your power healed wounds and burned away paralysis. He knelt again. We come to offer ourselves to your service. To fight for Nighthaven. To protect the queen who would give everything to save her pack. More voices joined his. For the Golden Queen! Someone shouted. For the healer of Nighthaven! The chant spread through the crowd, growing louder with each repetition. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes as she realized what was happening. These wolves weren't just pledging loyalty to Nighthaven or to Kale. They were pledging loyalty to her. I don't know what to say, she admitted quietly. Then show them. Kale's hand found the small of her back, supporting her. Show them the queen who saved them all. Sarah took a deep breath and let her power rise. Just a flicker. She was still too weak for more, but enough that golden light haloed her body. The crowd gasped, and the chanting grew even louder. "I accept your pledge," Sarah's voice rang out across the courtyard. "And I make you a promise in return. Prince Aldrich wants to destroy us. He thinks we're animals to be hunted and killed. But we will show him what we really are. We are pack. We are family. And we will not go quietly into extinction." The wolves howled their approval, the sound shaking the very stones of Crimson Citadel. As the crowd dispersed to prepare for war, Cale pulled Sarah close. "You've done it," he murmured against her hair. "You've united the packs in a way I never could. They don't just fear me anymore, they believe in you." "I don't want them to believe in me," Sarah said. "I want them to believe in us, in what we can build together." "Together," Kyle agreed, pulling her closer. "Always together." Later that night, back in their chambers, Sarah asked the question that had been weighing on her. "The trial. When will it happen?" "Tomorrow." Cale's voice was grim. "The council demands justice and they'll have it. Corvus will face every alpha he betrayed. And then he dies." Cale's arms tightened around her. "I know you have a kind heart, Seraphina. But there can be no mercy for what he did. He has to serve as an example. Betraying the packs has consequences." Sarah nodded, understanding even if part of her wished for another way. "And after? When Aldrich's army comes? We make our stand." Cale's hand came up to cup her face. "But before that happens, there's something I need to say. Something I should have said weeks ago." Sarah looked up at him, her heart suddenly racing. "What?" "I love you." The words came out raw, vulnerable. "I've been trying not to. Trying to keep that distance because I was afraid of what it would mean. But watching you nearly die twice now, I realize I can't hold back anymore. I love you, Seraphina Thornridge, more than I've ever loved anything or anyone." Sarah felt tears spill down her cheeks. "I love you too, even though you're stubborn and overprotective, and sometimes infuriatingly noble." He kissed her, cutting off her words. And this time, there was no hesitation, no holding back. This was a claiming and a promise, and a vow, all wrapped into one. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sarah rested her forehead against his. "We're going to survive this. Together." "Together," Kyle agreed. "Now and always." They spent the rest of the night in each other's arms, knowing that war was coming but choosing to focus on what they'd found in each other. And when dawn came, bringing Corvus's trial and the preparations for the coming conflict, they would face it side by side, the Winter King and the Golden Queen, united, unbroken, unstoppable. The weeks following Corvus's execution, swift and witnessed by every alpha in the territories, transformed Crimson Citadel into a fortress preparing for the war of their lifetime. Sarah stood on the battlements one morning, watching new arrivals stream through the gates. Every day brought more wolves seeking to join the fight, drawn by tales of the Golden Queen who could heal the unhealable. "They're getting faster," Darius commented, appearing at her side. "Another few days and they'll be ready for actual combat." "Will days be enough?" Sarah watched a particularly young wolf struggle with his transformation practice. "Aldrich's army could be here within the month. Our scouts report they're still gathering forces in Iron Spire. We have some time." Darius hesitated. "My queen, there's something you should know. More alphas have arrived. They're asking for an audience." "Let me guess. They want to challenge Cale's authority?" "No. They want to bond with you." Sarah's head snapped around. "What?" "Not mating bonds," Darius clarified quickly. "They're asking for marks. Lesser marks, like the connection you share with Cale, but weaker. They've heard that your power can spread, and they want to be able to channel your healing in battle. Sarah's mind raced. At Starfall, she'd spread her power through existing pack bonds and her connection to Kale. But creating new marks, new channels for her magic. Is that even possible? Thalia thinks so. She's been researching the old texts. Darius's expression was careful. But it would mean marking multiple wolves, creating bonds with them. And Kale would hate it, Sarah finished. She could imagine his reaction. The possessive alpha who barely tolerated others being near her, now watching as she created magical connections with other wolves. But strategically. It would change the entire war, Darius said bluntly. If you could mark even 10 wolves, and they could channel your healing to others in battle, we'd have mobile healing centers across the battlefield. Aldrich's weapons would be useless. Sarah looked back at the training grounds, at the young wolves who would be fighting for their lives. How many are asking? 50 volunteers, all willing to accept whatever consequences come from bonding with a queen whose power is still not fully understood. I need to talk to Kale. She found him in the war room, bent over maps with several pack leaders. They were arguing tactics, voices rising as they debated the best way to defend against a force 10 times their size. We can't hold the valley, one alpha insisted. We need to fall back to the mountain passes where numbers matter less. And abandon half our territory? Another countered. That's admitting defeat before the battle even starts. Gentlemen, Sarah's voice cut through the argument. I need a moment with my husband. The alphas bowed and filed out, leaving Sarah alone with Kale. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes from too many sleepless nights spent planning. Let me guess, he said wearily. Darius told you about the marking requests. You already knew? Of course I knew. Every wolf in this citadel knows. Kale turned back to his maps. And the answer is no. You haven't even heard my thoughts on it. I don't need to. His voice was hard. Marking creates bonds. Intimate connections. Every wolf you mark will feel echoes of what we share. Some are young males, Seraphina. Do you understand what it will do to them? Feeling even a fraction of the bond between mates? I understand it will save lives. Sarah moved closer. Kale, we're about to face 30,000 soldiers with weapons designed to kill us, without some kind of advantage. Without you burning yourself out trying to heal an entire army. Kale's control snapped, his voice rising. Do you know what it does to me? Feeling you pour out your power until there's nothing left? Watching you collapse because you gave everything to save others? If you create multiple bonds and try to channel healing through all of them simultaneously, I could die. Sarah finished quietly. I know. Thalia warned me. The admission seemed to take the wind out of Kale's anger. He slumped against the table, suddenly looking every one of his 35 years. Then you understand why I can't allow it. It's not your choice to allow or forbid. Sarah kept her voice gentle but firm. I'm your mate, Kale. Your equal, not your subject. You're the only thing in this world I can't lose. His voice broke. Please, Seraphina. Don't ask me to watch you kill yourself saving wolves who might abandon you the moment the tide turns. They won't abandon me. Sarah took his hands, pulling him to face her. They believe in what we're building here. A kingdom where wolves don't live in fear, where power is used to protect, not destroy. That's worth fighting for. Worth dying for, if it comes to that. Not to me. Kale's forehead pressed against hers. Not if it costs me you. Sarah felt her heart break a little at the raw emotion in his voice. Then help me find another way. A way to channel my power without burning out. Because I'm going to do this, Kyle. With or without your blessing. Those wolves are volunteering knowing the risks. I won't let their courage go to waste. For a long moment, Kale was silent. Then he sighed, defeated. "You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met." "You've said that before." "It bears repeating." He pulled back to look at her. "If we're doing this, we're doing it carefully. You mark 5 wolves, not 50. We test the bonds, see how much power you can channel without hurting yourself. And if at any point Thalia says you're approaching your limits, you stop. Immediately. Non-negotiable." It wasn't everything Sarah wanted, but it was a start. "Deal. And one more condition." Kale's eyes blazed with possessive fire. "The mark you give them is nothing like mine. They get a lesser bond, a tool for channeling magic, not an emotional connection. You are mine, Seraphina. Heart, soul, and body. That doesn't change." "That will never change," Sarah assured him. She pulled him down for a kiss, pouring everything she felt into it. Her love, her gratitude, her absolute certainty that they would survive this together. When they broke apart, Kale rested his forehead against hers. "If you die because of this, I'm going to be very angry with you." "Noted." Sarah smiled. "Now let's go tell Darius to choose 5 volunteers. And Kale, thank you for trusting me." "Always," he murmured, "even when it terrifies me." The marking ceremony took place 2 days later in the Great Hall. Sarah had spent those days with Thalia, learning the precise technique for creating lesser bonds, marks that would allow magic to flow, but wouldn't create the deep emotional connection she shared with Kale. 5 wolves knelt before her, 3 males and 2 females, all young and strong, all volunteers from different packs. They'd been chosen not just for their fighting ability, but for their capacity to lead. Each would command a unit in the coming battle, spreading Sarah's healing wherever it was most needed. "This will hurt," Sarah warned them. "The mark burns as it settles. And once it's done, you'll be connected to me. You'll feel my presence at the edges of your consciousness. If that becomes too much..." "It won't." The eldest of them, a female alpha named Cassia, said firmly. "We understand the risks, my queen, and we accept them gladly." Sarah looked to Kyle, who stood at the edge of the hall with his arms crossed, his expression carefully neutral. She felt his tension, his barely controlled jealousy at what she was about to do. "I love you," she sent to him silently. "Only you. Always you." His expression softened fractionally. "I know. Doesn't make this easier." Sarah turned back to the volunteers. "Then we begin." She placed her hand on the first wolf's shoulder, a young male named Gareth, and let her power rise. Not the full force of her magic, just a careful thread of it, reaching out to create a connection. She found the place where pack bonds naturally formed and gently wove her power into it. Gareth gasped as golden light spread from her palm across his skin, sinking beneath the surface. When it faded, a small mark remained on his shoulder, a stylized wolf's head wreathed in light, much simpler than the intricate mark Kale had given her. "How do you feel?" Sarah asked. "Strange." Gareth flexed his marked shoulder. "I can feel warmth, like sunlight just beneath my skin. And I can sense you, my queen. Not your thoughts, but your presence. Like knowing someone's in the room even with your eyes closed." "Good. That's how it should work." Sarah moved to the next volunteer. One by one, she marked them all. By the time she finished with the 5th, Sarah was trembling with exhaustion but still standing. Thalia nodded approvingly from her position nearby. The old healer had been monitoring Sarah's vital signs throughout, ready to intervene if the marking became dangerous. "Now for the test," Sarah said. She drew a small knife and, before anyone could stop her, cut a shallow line across her palm. "What are you doing?" Kyle was at her side instantly, reaching for her hand. "Testing the bond." Sarah held up her bleeding palm. "Watch." She closed her eyes and pushed healing magic into the 5 new bonds. The marked wolves gasped in unison as power flooded through them, and Sarah felt the magic flow out, then loop back to her, carrying the healing with it. When she opened her eyes, her palm was whole again, and none of the marked wolves had collapsed or shown signs of strain. Incredible, Thalia breathed. You didn't just channel magic through them. You created a circuit. Your power flows out, heals the target, and returns to you. That means... That means I can heal without draining myself, Sarah finished, staring at her unmarked palm in wonder. As long as I'm channeling, I'm not using up my own reserves. They're acting as conduits and amplifiers. Which changes everything, Darius said, a fierce smile spreading across his face. My queen, you've just ensured we survive this war. But Kale was frowning. There has to be a catch. Magic always has limits. There is, Thalia confirmed. The marked wolves will bear the strain instead of the queen. If she channels too much power through them for too long, they'll burn out, Kale finished grimly. He looked at the 5 marked wolves. You understand what you've agreed to? You're not just conduits. You're shields, protecting your queen by taking the damage she would have suffered. We understand, Cassia said, and we accept it willingly. Better 5 wolves risk burnout than lose our queen and everyone she could save. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes at their courage. I won't let it come to that. I'll monitor the bonds constantly. If any of you start to strain. Then we push through anyway, Gareth interrupted with a grin. That's what soldiers do, my queen. Word of the marking spread through the citadel within hours. By evening, another 100 wolves were requesting to be marked as well. Kel refused additional marks for now, wanting to see how the first 5 performed in training exercises. But Sarah could see the hope in the wolves' eyes. They finally had a real chance against Aldrich's army. That night, exhausted from the day's events, Sarah returned to her chambers to find Kale already there, staring into the fire. You handled that well, she said softly. I know it wasn't easy for you. You marked other wolves with power drawn from our bond, Kale said flatly. Every one of those marks is created from what we share. Part of me is now in them, and part of them is in you. He turned to look at her, his eyes blazing. So no, it wasn't easy. It went against every instinct I have. But you let me do it anyway. Sarah moved closer. Because you trust me. Because I love you more than I hate sharing you. Kale pulled her against him, his arms banding around her waist. But make no mistake, Seraphina. You are mine. Those wolves have a sliver of our bond, a tool for magic. You belong to me completely. Show me, Sarah whispered, rising on her toes to meet his lips. The kiss was fierce and possessive, Kale claiming her mouth like he was proving a point. Sarah responded with equal passion, her hands fisting in his shirt as she pulled him closer. I need you, Kale growled against her throat. Need to remind myself that you're mine. That no mark, no bond, no magic will ever change that. Then take me, Sarah breathed. I'm yours, Kale. Only yours. They came together with desperate intensity. All pretense of restraint finally shattered. And as their bodies joined, Sarah felt their connection explode into brilliant life, linking them on every level, physical, magical, spiritual. This was what they were meant to be. Not just king and queen, but true mates. 2 halves of a whole, bound by magic older than memory. Later, as they lay tangled together in the aftermath, Kale pressed a kiss to the mark on her neck. His mark, the one that had started everything. I don't know how this war is going to end, he said quietly. But I know that whatever happens, I found you. And that makes everything else worth it. Sarah turned in his arms to face him. We're going to win. We have to. There's too much at stake. When Aldrich's army arrives, we'll face them together. Sarah pressed a finger to his lips. No more talk of war tonight. Tonight, we're just Kale and Seraphina. Just two people who love each other. The war can wait until morning. Kyle captured her hand, kissing her fingers one by one, as my queen commands. They made love again, slower this time, savoring every touch and kiss. And later, Sarah felt Kale's love wrapping around her like a shield, promising that whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together, always together. The ravens arrived at dawn 3 days later. Sarah woke to frantic pounding on the door and Kale already moving, pulling on clothes with practiced efficiency. Darius burst in without waiting for permission, his face ashen. They're here. Aldrich's army. They're marching through the southern pass. They'll reach the valley by nightfall. Sarah's blood turned to ice. We're out of time. We're out of time, Kale agreed grimly. He turned to Darius. Sound the alarm. Get every wolf to battle stations. Send runners to the outer territories. Anyone who hasn't arrived yet needs to know this is it. His silver eyes found Saraz. And get the Queen's Guard ready. I'm not hiding, Saraz said immediately, already dressing and pulling on her armor. Seraphina. I'm not hiding. She fixed him with a look that brooked no argument. I'm the reason half these wolves are here. I'm the reason we have any chance at all. If I stay behind walls while they fight, what message does that send? Kale looked like he wanted to argue, but Darius cleared his throat. She's right, Kale. The wolves need to see their queen standing with them, need to know she believes in victory enough to risk her life for it. Kale's jaw clenched, but he nodded curtly. Fine. But you stay in the center of our formation, protected by the marked wolves and my personal guard. Non-negotiable. Agreed, Sarah said, fastening the last buckle on her crimson armor. By midday, Crimson Citadel was organized chaos, weapons distributed, positions assigned, strategies reviewed for the final time. Sarah spent the hours before battle moving among the wolves, offering words of encouragement and spreading her healing magic to anyone bearing old injuries. The marked wolves stayed close, forming a protective circle around her wherever she went. Sarah could feel them now, their determination, their fear, their absolute commitment to protecting her. When the sun began its descent toward the horizon, the scouts returned with final reports. Prince Aldrich's army was massive, 30,000 soldiers, just as predicted. They'd brought siege engines and cavalry, ballistae, and enough supplies to outlast a long siege. We meet them in the valley, Kale announced to the assembled alphas. Open field combat where our speed and strength matter more than numbers. That's suicide, one alpha protested. In the open, they'll surround us. Let them try, Darius said grimly. They're expecting poison and paralytic to work. They don't know about the marked wolves. Don't know our queen can heal faster than they can injure. By the time they realize their weapons are useless, we'll have already torn through their front lines. Sarah listened, her hand unconsciously moving to the mark on her neck. She felt Kale's steady confidence despite his inner fears. He was putting on a show of certainty for the troops, but inside, he was terrified. We're not dying today, she sent to him firmly. I won't allow it. That's not how war works, little wolf. Then let's change how war works. As darkness fell, the wolves of Nighthaven assembled in the valley below the citadel. 3,000 strong, a fraction of Aldrich's forces, but every one of them a trained fighter who'd chosen to stand against impossible odds. Sarah stood at the center of the formation, her marked wolves surrounding her in a protective circle. Kale had wanted her further back, but she'd refused. The wolves needed to see her, needed to know she was with them. Then, like a tide of metal and malice, Aldrich's army appeared over the ridge. They marched in perfect formation, banners snapping in the wind, the setting sun glinting off thousands of weapons and armor. At their head rode Prince Aldrich himself, resplendent in golden plate armor, a crown already sitting on his head despite his father still living. Wolves of the Northern Territories. Aldrich's voice, magically amplified, rolled across the valley. You stand at the edge of extinction. Your kind has plagued humanity for too long, and today, that ends. Surrender now, give us your so-called queen, and I'll let the rest of you flee north with your lives. Never! The roar came from 3,000 throats simultaneously, a sound that shook the valley floor. Aldrich's smile was cruel. So be it. Ready arms. The army behind him shifted, crossbows raising, spears lowering, cavalry beginning their charge. This is it, Cale said quietly, his voice carrying to every wolf present. Remember your training. Protect your packmates, and trust in your queen. His eyes found Sarah's across the distance. I love you. I love you too, Sarah whispered, knowing he'd hear it. Now let's show them what we're made of. Aldrich's arm fell, and 30,000 soldiers surged forward with a deafening roar. And the Golden Queen of Nighthaven let her power blaze forth like the sun itself, turning the battlefield into a crucible where the fate of two peoples would be decided in blood and magic and fire. The battle for the Northern Territories had begun. The first volley of arrows darkened the sky, thousands of projectiles arcing toward the wolf lines. Sarah felt the marked wolves brace themselves, ready to channel her healing the moment the shafts struck home. But Cale had planned for this. Shields! He roared, and the front lines raised massive barriers made of reinforced wood and steel. The arrows struck with devastating force, but most shattered harmlessly against the defenses. Those that found their mark, poison-tipped, paralytic-laced, sank into wolf flesh. And immediately, Sarah's power blazed to life. She channeled healing into the 5 marked wolves, feeling the poison spreading, feeling the paralytic trying to take hold. But her magic moved faster, racing through the connections like wildfire, burning away toxins before they could do lasting damage. The wounded wolves staggered, then straightened, roared their defiance, charged forward instead of collapsing. Impossible! She heard someone scream from Aldrich's lines. They should be down. Why aren't they down? Because they have me, Sarah whispered, her hands glowing with golden light as she channeled healing through 5 conduits simultaneously. The armies collided with earth-shaking force. Wolves in their beast forms tore into human lines, faster and stronger than any normal creature. But Aldrich's soldiers were well-trained and well-armed, and for every soldier who fell, 2 more stepped up to take their place. Sarah watched in horror as the sheer numbers began to tell. The wolves were better fighters individually, but they were drowning in enemies. Even with her healing, they couldn't hold against 30,000. We need to break their formation, Darius shouted, appearing at her side covered in blood. If we can scatter them, our speed advantage becomes decisive. How? Sarah demanded, already channeling healing toward a cluster of wounded wolves to her left. The prince. If we take him down, his army might break. Darius pointed toward the center of Aldrich's forces, where the golden-armored prince directed his troops from horseback. But he's surrounded by his personal guard. Getting to him would require... Sarah felt Kyle's determination crystallize through their bond, and her blood ran cold as she realized what he intended. No, she whispered. Cale, don't... But he was already moving. She watched as Cale's massive wolf form blazed with power. Not just his own, but magic he was pulling from their bond. He was using her power to enhance himself, making himself faster, stronger, more dangerous than any living creature had a right to be. He tore through Aldrich's lines like a force of nature, heading straight for the prince. Cover the king! Darius roared, and wolves surged forward to protect Cale's flanks. But Aldrich's guards were rallying, forming a wall of steel and shields around their prince. Cale crashed into them with devastating force. Sarah felt every wound he took, a sword across his flank, a spear through his shoulder, dozens of cuts from blades designed to bleed him out. And she poured healing into him as fast as she could, keeping him on his feet through sheer willpower. But the marked wolves were flagging. She could feel them struggling under the weight of channeling so much power. "My queen!" Cassia gasped beside her. "I don't know how much longer." "Hold on," Sarah commanded. "Just a little longer." "He's almost there." Kyle reached Aldrich's inner circle, his jaws closing around the throat of the last guard before the prince himself. Aldrich's horse reared in terror, and for a moment, victory seemed within reach. Then Aldrich drew a sword that blazed with unnatural fire, and Sarah screamed as he drove it through Cale's chest. She felt everything. The burning agony of the enchanted blade, the shock as it pierced his heart, the darkness beginning to close in. "No!" Sarah's scream shook the battlefield. Power exploded from her in a wave that sent friend and foe alike stumbling backward. She didn't think, didn't plan, just reached for Kyle with everything she had. And she pulled. Not just healing. She ripped Cale's consciousness from the brink of death and held it, refusing to let him go. Poured her life force directly into him, burning through her own reserves to keep his heart beating. The marked wolves cried out in pain as the strain became unbearable, but Sarah couldn't stop. Wouldn't stop. She'd rather burn out completely than lose him. "Stay with me," she snarled. "You don't get to die." "Not today. Not ever." Cale's wolf form convulsed, the sword still lodged in his chest. But his heart kept beating, kept beating, kept dash dash. The enchanted blade exploded in a shower of golden sparks as Sarah's magic overwhelmed its power and destroyed it from within. Cale staggered but stayed standing, the wound already beginning to close around the shattered blade. Aldrich's face went white with terror. "What are you?" "I'm his mate," Sarah said, her voice carrying across the sudden silence. "I'm his queen. And you just made a fatal mistake." She released the full force of her power. Every wolf on the battlefield, whether they bore her mark or not, suddenly blazed with golden light. Wounds healed in seconds, exhaustion burned away, and into each of them, Sarah poured her absolute conviction that they would win. The wolves attacked with renewed fury, no longer just fighting for survival, but for victory. And Aldrich's soldiers, seeing their prince's sword shattered and their enemies suddenly invulnerable, began to break. "Hold the line!" Aldrich screamed. "They're just animals! Hold the dash dash!" Cale's jaws closed around Aldrich's arm, yanking him from his horse. The prince hit the ground hard, his crown rolling away into the mud. "Don't kill him," Sarah's voice rang out. "We need him alive." Cale shifted back to human form, one hand pressed to his still healing chest, the other at Aldrich's throat. "Give me one reason why." "Because if you kill him now, his generals will just continue the war in his name." Sarah approached, her marked wolves flanking her despite their exhaustion. She looked down at Aldrich with contempt. "But if he survives to tell the tale of his defeat, if he goes back to the human kingdoms broken and humiliated, they'll think twice before attacking us again." "You can't let me live," Aldrich spat blood. "I'll raise another army. Come back with 100,000 soldiers, You'll do nothing," Sarah said coldly. She knelt beside him and placed one glowing hand on his forehead. "Because I'm going to make sure you remember exactly what happened here today. Remember what it feels like to be helpless, to be at someone's mercy." She pushed the memories into his mind. Every moment of the battle, every wolf who'd fallen because of his ambition, every face of the soldiers who'd died following his orders. When she pulled her hand back, Aldrich was sobbing. "Now get out of my kingdom," Cale said quietly. Take your soldiers and go. And if you ever threaten my people again, I won't stop my mate from letting you die screaming." Aldrich scrambled to his feet and ran, his personal guards following. And slowly, like a tide retreating, the human army withdrew. They left behind their siege engines, their supplies, their wounded, all of it abandoned in their haste to flee from the wolves who couldn't be killed. As silence finally fell over the valley, Sarah collapsed. The strain of healing an entire army simultaneously had pushed her far beyond her limits. She felt Cale catch her before darkness claimed her consciousness. "I've got you," he murmured. "You did it, Seraphina. You saved us all." "We did it," she whispered. "Together." Then she knew nothing more. 8 years later. Sarah woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the sound of laughter from the gardens below. She stretched luxuriously, noting the empty space beside her in the massive bed. Kel must have already started his day. She rose and moved to the window, looking out over what Crimson Citadel had become. The fortress was still there, but now it was surrounded by a thriving city. Wolf and human homes side by side, markets bustling with trade between the species, children of both kinds playing together in the streets. So much had changed in 8 years. After the Battle of Crimson Valley, as it had come to be called, the other human kingdoms had quickly sued for peace. Aldrich had been deposed by his own nobles, deemed unfit to rule after his catastrophic defeat. His younger sister, Princess Alara, had taken the throne instead and immediately sent envoys seeking friendship rather than war. It had been slow work, building trust between species that had feared and hated each other for centuries. But Sarah and Cale had done it, one treaty at a time, one alliance at a time. Now Nighthaven was the jewel of the North, a kingdom where wolves and humans lived in harmony, protected by the Golden Queen whose healing magic had ended the war before it could destroy them all. "Mama! Mama! Look what I can do!" Sarah's attention snapped to the garden, where a small girl with dark hair and silver eyes was showing off for her younger brother. As Sarah watched, the girl shifted seamlessly into a small wolf pup, her silver fur gleaming in the morning light. "That's wonderful, Alia," Sarah called down. "But remember to shift back before breakfast. You know the cook hates when you track mud through the kitchen." Alia shifted back to human form, giggling. At 9 years old, she was already showing signs of inheriting both her parents' power. Cale's strength and Sarah's healing magic merged into something entirely new. Her little brother, 5-year-old Rowan, named after Sarah's grandfather, who'd lived just long enough to meet his great-granddaughter before passing, peacefully in his sleep, was still learning to shift. But he had his father's eyes and his mother's stubborn determination. "They're getting stronger every day," Cale's voice came from the doorway. Sarah turned to find her husband watching her with open adoration. Even after 8 years, the sight of him still made her breath catch. He'd aged well. A few silver threads in his dark hair, laugh lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. But he was still the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. "Come here," she said, and he crossed the room to pull her into his arms. "I've been thinking," Cale murmured against her hair. "Maybe it's time we took a vacation. Just the two of us. Leave the kingdom in Darius's capable hands for a few weeks, and remember what it's like to be just Cale and Seraphina, instead of the Winter King and the Golden Queen." "That sounds perfect." Sarah rose on her toes to kiss him. "Where would we go?" "Anywhere. Everywhere. As long as I'm with you, I don't care." They stood together, watching their children play in the garden of the kingdom they'd built together. A kingdom where wolves no longer lived in fear, where healing was valued over violence, where love had conquered hate. "Do you ever regret it?" Cale asked softly. "Agreeing to marry me that morning? Giving up the life you knew?" "Never." Sarah turned in his arms to face him fully. "That morning, I thought my life was ending. But it wasn't ending. It was just beginning. Mine too. Kale pressed a kiss to the mark on her neck. His mark. The one that had started everything. I love you, Seraphina Thornridge. More today than yesterday. Less than tomorrow. I love you too, Sarah whispered. Now and always. Until the mountains crumble and the stars burn out. They stood together as morning light filled their chambers, two halves of a whole that was stronger than either could be alone. The Winter King and the Golden Queen, who'd found each other in darkness and built something beautiful in the light. And in the garden below, their children laughed and played, growing up in a world where the sins of the past had been healed by their parents' love, a world worth fighting for, a world they'd won together.